Hello, and thank you for listening to AI SuccessFactors podcast. We help enterprise adopt artificial intelligence. This is Samuel Matthew, your host. In simple terms, AI adoption is a three-step process: identifying the right AI opportunity, tying it back to a business value, and align it to a business goal. If you're a leader, needs help demonstrating ROI on your existing AI initiatives, or want to get a buy-in for a new AI initiative, you are in the right place. Our mission is to empower enterprise leaders to navigate, transform, and lead by applying AI into their business. In this show, we interview analytical and business leaders who successfully implemented AI into their business. In the conversations we feature, you will learn how these companies reach strategic business goals. It's a pleasure and privilege for our listeners to develop a point of view from the insights shared in this podcast. Today, we're joined by Pranamika Balaji, Vice President of Data Analytics and AI at Citi. Citi is a leading Fortune 100 global bank operating in more than 160 countries and employing over 200,000 professionals worldwide. Pranamika is a leading voice in product innovation and applied AI. Her experience spans global banking and emerging markets, where she has pioneered solutions that blend human-centric design with enterprise-scale transformation. Her work sits at the intersection of data, technology, and trust, helping organizations to move from AI experimentation to operational excellence. In this episode of AI SuccessFactors, we explore how banks can move beyond efficiency to view AI as both a growth and trust enabler. We dive into themes such as AI-driven microlending, vernacular and conversational AI, data fabric foundations for scalable AI, and MLOps for faster, reliable deployment. We'll also look ahead to the next frontier, agentic and generative AI copilots, and what they mean for future financial innovation. Here is our conversation. Hey, Pranamika, welcome to AI SuccessFactors podcast.
Hey, thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to see you again and have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Hey, Pranamika, the banking industry is at an inflection point, moving beyond efficiency use cases toward growth and trust-driven AI adoption. When we talk about AI in banking, it's easy to get caught up in buzz, automation, chatbots, data lakes, but the real story is much bigger. It's about how AI is quietly redefining what it means to grow, serve, and build trust in financial relationships. The banks that figure out how to operationalize AI, not just experiment with it, will be the ones shaping the future of this industry. And Pranamika, you are having front row seat in this evolution. Our executive audience would like to hear what's your take on what's working and what's not, and what leaders should be paying attention right now. With that said, let's start with your perspective on what are the strategic priorities for leaders as AI adoption is maturing across banking industry?
True, agreed to what you said. If we look at the current, AI trend and the way it's getting matured, my suggestion would be to not just look onto your competitors, rather than that, looking at something that you're really good at and using AI as an enabler to do that. Let's take an example of social bank, regional bank, all these small banks. So what is their biggest competitive moat? It is the relationship that they form. So rather than fighting or mimicking the big banks, how they do it, I feel they should rather focus on this particular human relationship aspect. As you rightly mentioned, AI is no longer about, the operation efficiency improver. Rather, it's a growth enabler with a purpose. So from strategic point of view, I would say there should be 3 shifts that every bank should adapt. Especially, this is for the small banks, I would say, since we are speaking in that context. The first one is the shift from having the data silos to the shared intelligence. Imagine a regional bank owner or loan officer or any data analyst in a bank have a 360-degree view of a customer. That's what needs to happen. Rather than having data amongst a particular department, let's say retail or lending or wealth, this should be shared across an organization. This would further improve the personalization, which is like the biggest, like propagator and pioneer for establishing that human relationship. Second, I feel the shift should be, AI shouldn't be seen as a cost cutter, but rather as a growth enabler. And how do we do that? AI can spot all the economic potentials that are available. The underbanked sections, the unbanked sections. Let's say they take the example of seasonal loan, harvest loans. So those kind of potential areas where the economic need is there could be identified, and these could be used as growth enabler. Finally, the way the bank should look should not be like complaint first approach rather than trust first approach. AI offers explainability today. Imagine somebody has applied for loan and their loan is getting rejected, but then it says it is because since your debt to equity ratio is lesser than the appropriate number, it has happened. So that offers explainability, and with explainability comes the trust. So the North Star for any bank should be to focus on what they are really good at, especially in building human relationship rather than mimicking big banks or any other banks.
Today focus is more on community and regional bank. Before this podcast, I looked at the statistics, and when I looked at the FDIC data, there are millions of US households still remain unbanked or underbanked. And we often talk about financial inclusion as a social goal, but it's also a growth strategy, and few of the things you already mentioned. I would love to hear your thoughts on how AI help banks tap into these underserved and unbanked markets, and whether we're seeing this play out differently for large versus community banks. For large banks, these represents untapped revenue pools if served with innovative, low-cost AI-enabled products. For regional banks, it's about survival and growth and through differentiation. So, in that perspective, how can AI help banks to tap into this untapped market effectively?
As you rightly mentioned, in United States alone, there is hundreds of billions of these underbanked and unbanked market waiting yet to be tapped. So AI is like supervision. It can look beyond what a traditional legacy, like a credit scoring or a risk scoring can actually do. Let's take an example of a young entrepreneur who has this thriving store with Etsy, and she pays her rent on time, has like all her utility bills paid, her digital payment footprint is really great, but then she doesn't have a credit history or has not got a loan before. For a traditional underwriter, she is invisible. Her loan wouldn't be approved. Rather than that, what AI can actually do is look beyond it. It can look into the non-traditional signals such as the utility bills, rent payments, and then it tries to create a trust profile for her. And based on that trust profile, all of a sudden she becomes bankable. It's a very smart economics. So there is, as I mentioned earlier, the United States has a lot of gig workers, lot of rural counties where you cannot see a credit footprint, but actually there is a huge opportunity there due to the immense economic activity. So from the beginning, from the strategic perspective, I have always been mentioning about the personalization, the human relationship. So through conversational vernacular AI, they can build it, and to tap into the underbanked and unbanked society, they can go with all these non-traditional signals called as alternate credit.
Beautiful. How a bank implement this? Can you just briefly talk about technical implementation of the alternative credit scoring?
Sure. You should see all these, tracking of these non-traditional signals like a 360-degree digital twin of you. Now,
Right.
this is a 3-step process, and the technology behind it is really awesome. So, first step is all about ingestion of the data. The data could be structured data like your transaction history, digital payment footprint, utility bills, rental payment, etc., etc. And another set of data is unstructured data, which comes from your transaction notes. Let's say you're doing a remittance, the remittance
Right.
notes. So, all these unstructured data through NLP are converted to a big data, and these data needs to be ingested by AI by creating a data pipeline. Once the data pipeline is placed, then comes the application of models. Now, what these machine models do is they try to correlate between the traditional repayment factors with these alternate signals. For instance, take GNN, which is graphical neural network, which
Right.
tries to map the relationship between a transaction or a remittance to the family or the supplier to whom they have done and try to assess and build the trust profile. Finally comes the explainability part. Now, in explainability part, the AI offers the explanation for that particular trust profile. This person is credit worthy because of so and so reason. So I would call it like a holy trinity. There is financial inclusivity, there is profitability, and also regulator friendly way of looking at it due to the ability that AI offers.
So you mentioned about vernacular conversational banking. And one of the things that's crossing my mind is when you talk about this population, underbanked or unbanked population, that's where you have most of the challenge in terms of adapting technologies, right? So with that in mind, can you tell me what are the kind of applications that's possible in this area? For me, it's my wild thought. I'm just thinking about maybe call center transformation where, a lot of times non-English speaking customer call in, then we need to have a bilingual agent talking to that customer. So do you think NLP can be applied in there, especially, large language models can be applied in there that for the benefit of these customers so they feel home and they talk in their native language. There are n number of households speak different languages at home. So, or onboarding is another area where account setup where say give instructions. What are the things you need to set it up, creating the customer, know your customer profile and such. So can you just tell one quick applications on conversational vernacular AI?
Yeah, sure. So America is a land of opportunities, and there are people speaking different languages over here. The two great applications are the conversational bots, which they can find in their mobile app, and second one is the voice agents, which are currently being used in any of the call centers. Dwelling deep onto the conversational AI on mobile apps, let's say there is this farmer in Texas who speaks Spanish, that too in a particular dialect. Now he wants to ask, how do I repay the loan? Now these LLM powered chatbots try to understand what he's telling, and they are all like contextualized in nature. So it better understands and replies back to him in a simple language what he could, better understand it. And that is what is changing, and that is what is making things like a lot more personal nowadays. And second thing is the agentic voice agents which are available in the call centers, pretty much right from an inbound call to an outbound call. All these are done by these voice agents. So the list of people they have to be contacted, everything is pre-provided in the form of data. And then they call a particular person and answer to them in a language they understand. So the technology behind it is the NLP, which transforms whatever the recipient is talking, and each of their words are like vectorized so that AI can understand it better, and then it is converted into a form which is like human understandable by all the semantic layers, and that's how this entire workflow happens.
Great. So we've been talking about the retail banking side of this untapped market. There is another side to it where there are merchants, right? Small merchants, and they wouldn't qualify for their traditional loans. And micro lending is another area. So can you talk a little bit about how micro lending is applied in the area of micro lending?
True. Traditionally, when underwriting happens, how much it costs or how much time it takes to process a $500 loan is same as how much time it takes to process or how much it costs to approve a $500,000 loan. Now, having said that, here the biggest problem or the challenge that any bank faces is the processing cost sometimes eats up the margin in case of micro lending. And that's where AI comes in and AI changes the math. Earlier, most of the micro lenders who, go for like a $500, $1,000 loan would be shut out. But no longer, it's not the case.
Right.
What AI can actually do is there is this OCR technology, there is document reader where there is this RAG pipeline, extract your data from the document, try to understand it. On top of it, there is this risk model which can assess the risk, and dynamic pricing models telling how much loan should go for a particular person. So this entire process reduces the actual decision making process by 80%. Since we are talking about the bank, of course there should be human in the loop, but what
Right.
was taking like 10 days or 20 days, it's taking 10 minutes and 20 minutes right now. Adding to it, recently I read in a research paper about this predictive default models which can actually retrain the payment history data in days and not it takes quarters, which was like the earlier case. Having said about all these technology, the result is there is cost effectiveness and reduced cost in this processing. Now, since the process cost is reduced, processing time is reduced, there is a greater scope for micro lending and more people could be served. So I would say it is, like inclusive capitalism in action ever since the AI revolution has happened.
So it's very interesting, like when you look at these dynamics, right? So when the banks are competing for business, this segment is very advantageous, the community and regional banks, because these applications that we're talking about, micro lending or vernacular AI, any of these applications that we're talking about, these are particularly useful for these community and regional banks. And large institutions might have the scale, but smaller banks have the proximity and agility to personalize this experience very deeply in their customer base. And moving on to the listeners would be interested how it can be implemented. For a traditional setup, the data unification support analytics like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, all the analytics been done. Even then, we bring in all the data together. But in an agentic AI world, it support context understanding and reasoning. Like you mentioned before, for the farmer case, they need to get the dialect and they need to understand what context customer is speaking. Our listeners might be interested to know how are leading banks building unified data fabrics that gives Gen AI systems a holistic, real-time view of customer across retail, wealth, and commercial lines.
A good one. So earlier, it's all about, traditional data lakes, data warehouses,
Right.
and stuff like that. So
Right.
they are like the static photo album. It's good to, turn back and look at it. But if you actually look at it in real time, it's not that reactive. Now, what AI needs is a living fabric, which constantly gets updated, which adds to the contextualization, and it has like a wide around accessibility. Having said that, in this model, every customer history, be it their transaction history, be it their remittance history, or any document related to them, are fed into this unified pipeline that supports predictive analysis and decision making. Once this pipeline is built, it is made available to each and every section, retail, wealth, etc. That provides a shared intelligence which helps in personalization. Now, how does that happen? It happens through four basic building blocks. I feel any AI system, these four are like, super foundational in nature. To begin with, the vector databases, which ingest the data, converts it into a mathematical form that could be better understood by AI. So AI is no longer matching keywords. Rather than that, it is actually contextualizing the meaning. So this has great application in chatbots, or earlier we were talking about the vernacular, like bots, which are currently available in banking apps. Second important thing is knowledge graph. We are talking about shared intelligence a lot of times in this podcast itself.
Right.
Now, how does it made possible? The technology behind it is the knowledge graph, which kind of maps the relationship, like across every domain. Gather customer data, maps the relationship with retail, wealth, and lending so that it is like a lot more, shared in nature as well. Third is the semantic layers. Now AI has understood it in a mathematical form and it has, like given the output. Now how an analyst is going to, understand it? That's where you need these semantic layers, which converts the mathematical machine understood data to a data that a business can understand. And finally we have this, unified governance platform. Since we are talking about banking, it's all about data security, privacy, etc. So to add an all to that, trustworthiness, we have it. So with this unified pipeline, I think, that's how the banks are building.
I like the analogy of physical photo album, comparing that to old database and business intelligence. It's easy to grasp and remember it. I haven't heard someone using it before. And a few years ago, 10 years ago, DevOps was a big word, right? And now it's MLOps. So now that you explained what are the applications and what are the data foundation or infrastructure need to be in place for those applications, and if you can talk a little bit about the MLOps, because the data foundation is in place, so now how to operationalize AI faster and more reliably. So, and it helps banks in a lot of ways. So if you can tell a little bit about what are you seeing MLOps, how it's evolving in the banking context.
Sure. So MLOps is like now like the buzzword, and there's like, oh, what's the jargon and all of it. But in simple terms, MLOps is actually a DevOps for AI. Now, what usually happens when, let's say, especially for all these social small banks, which has to come up with credit products like really quick to the market, ideally in a traditional setup, first they have to, once like they decide about the product, they should update their credit risk model. After that, the fraud deduction system should be in place, and then the decision making process. If you look at it, the time to market used to be like really, really, really long. MLOps in simple terms kind of, automates and monitors that process in an autonomous setup so that the time taken could be reduced to a greater extent. Now, today, when a small business want to introduce a loan product or something, it sends it across this MLOps pipeline. Now, what happens is MLOps pipeline automatically triggers the retraining of all these raw data whenever a new data comes in. Once the training happens overnight, it is like the credit model is getting updated and it is getting deployed the very next day. So what was taking months today just take days. But there are challenges with current MLOps, like being at the cloud cost, or how are you going to establish it? And also, MLOps as such is not going to be able to, carry out this entire process. There needs to be a proper scalable infrastructure behind it, right from establishing data mesh, which is like a central clean library of all the data. And then you need to have the training clusters, which contains like all these millions of mathematical models, which are actually the backbone of MLOps. And here is MLOps, which kind of automates, monitors, trains everything on its own, the MLOps pipeline. And then you need to have an inference system, which makes that decision-making process much more faster, quicker by providing in millions of data. And finally, they should also, since we are talking about banks, they should also be this governance layer. So the setup as such is bigger one, but if you get the basics right, I think Cubs is changing the way the products are hitting the market right now.
So until a few years ago, the retraining the model was manual. So in the explanation that you just gave, overnight when the MLOps train itself, is it an automated process we set it up, or how does that happen? Does it any manual intervention needed for this?
No, this is like extremely automated. Going a little bit deeper on it, right? So there is this loan product or something that is coming in. Right. And then what ML ops, the pipeline which you have already establishes starts, triggering all these models. Now, what these models do is it retrains. It is set up in such a way that when a new data comes into the pipeline, it understands the type of data that's coming in. Here, let's say the case of a loan data. So it retrains all the attributes which are aligned with this loan data, and it is completely done automatically. Now, once that is done, overnight, it updates the, credit scoring or the fraud deduction model, whatever model that is appropriate for a particular product. Now, when everything is done, it deploys into the system. The only manual part that is required in this entire pipeline is for a person, a human, to actually approve this entire process. Now, when the deployment happens, there is continuous monitoring, there is continuous testing. All these are completely automated by the MLOps pipeline. So to answer your question, the only place where manual intervention is required is for the approval. It's always the human that does the final say. So that's like the basic core of AI ethics in banking. So yeah.
Yeah, human in the loop situation. Yeah, it's very useful, especially for the banking risk models like customers' credit score might change or business credit score might change based on that. Bank can assess the risk early and make adjustment based on that. It's very useful when we have the data on time. And the way you put forward is great. It's a great way of thinking about it. And once if the data foundation ML ops are clear and strong, bank finally have the stability and agility they need to start exploring what's next. And we're already seeing generative AI and agentic AI reshape how institutions interact with customers, and at least for the larger banks and how they manage risk, like I mentioned, or make decisions which is more contextual and autonomous. What's next is coming so fast. As banks look ahead, which of these frontier technologies do you think will have the biggest near term impact on financial innovation?
So when you talk about frontiers, I would say like the top three frontiers which are close to my heart are Gen AI copilots, Edge AI, and responsible AI framework. In Align, Gen AI copilots are the things that personalizes the way you look things. They are like AI personal assistants. Edge AI is about running models in your own mobile app rather than, like taking the help of the cloud, which reduces a huge latency. And finally, responsible AI framework. Since we are talking about bank, we need to have it in place to ensure fairness and bias and being unbiased and stuff like that. But focusing on for all these community regional banks in next 18 years, if you ask what is going to be the biggest game changers, I would say it is the Gen AI co-pilots. The reason being, imagine Gen AI co-pilots like a personal assistant for any of the relationship manager in the bank. Now,
Right.
what it actually does is it summarizes the customer history, then predict their churn rates and offer a personalized product for them. The best thing about it is how personal it can get based on the history of data of the customer that is being provided. What adds to the real magic in Copilot is feeding the Copilot with the dialects and vernacular. Earlier we were talking about it, right? By training these models with ensure there is a lot more personalization. If these AI agents are trained in vernacular and dialect aspect, it's going to make things a lot more magical. Imagine in a day, like a relationship manager walks in and says that, hey, based on the this particular customer's cash flow, I think this person is looking for, seasonal loans. So why don't you offer a harvest loan for him? So how much of a growth enabler AI is being here? So if you ask me what is the next best frontier, I would say all these, like Copilot Gen AI agents.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's such a valuable perspective. It really brings a full circle today from why AI matters strategically and how it's built, how it's deployed, and how it's governed responsibly. To close on a reflective note, what the leadership lesson or takeaway you would want today's executive to walk away with as they navigate the future of AI in their organization?
I would say start with community problems rather than looking at your competitors. AI is not a race for big budgets, rather for, like more empathy. And the third thing would be keep your, start simple, keep your basics right. Start with pilot launches, something like a vernacular conversational AI bot or any personalized offer or alternate credit loans. So just start with simple products, but get your basics right.
Right.
And as we were also talking about infrastructure, I say the data foundation is the key for, is the key enabler for the entire infrastructure. So get your data foundations right and treat AI as a relationship strategy and not as a tech strategy. Above all, there should be this executive awareness about AI, and there's been a lot of misconception lately. Oh, AI is going to take away my job. AI is going to, oh, all the small banks are going to go because of
Right.
AI. Let's break that myth. Let us understand that AI is actually an enabler, and AI actually, revitalizes all these small banks. It re-energizes the employees. It's like all the employees, for all of the employees, AI is like that extra X-ray vision. So that misconception should be broken, and people should start getting AI educated, both the employees and the banks. So that way we can bring in all financial literacy and lot more, like personalization of what we offer.
Hey, Pranamika, it was a fabulous conversation. Thank you, Pranamika,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your insights and experience. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious and keep pushing the boundaries of what AI can achieve. Thank you. If you like today's podcast, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. Your feedback is important. We always look for comments and recommendations to improve. This show is available on Apple Podcast, Google, and SoundCloud. Please do subscribe. Plus, you can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube. You can find the links to these pages in the show notes or by visiting us at AISuccessFactors.com. We publish episodes bi-weekly on Wednesdays. Please be sure to tune in for the next episode. Thank you and see you next time.